Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these.
I'm already laughing about Auntie's comment. Hey, everybody. Let's talk about the second installment of the Bloodlines. If you didn't watch part one, you might be a little bit lost. So go back and watch Bloodlines part one. I'm not going to do a review here because it'll take too much time. So we're going to continue talking about the hominid inheritance war. Let me say hi to a couple people. Adric is here first. He says it's on. Cosmic Surfer is here. He says, hi there, old souls. And Auntie is here and confused. But she's still my favorite Auntie. And for everybody watching from the clouds, hello. Feel free to say hello. Adric says he needs the cliff notes. Or maybe he'll put the cliff notes in. Hi, JB Design. Salute to you as well. And for the replay gang, hello to you as well. Be sure to comment. I answer every comment because I love these discussions. So let's get into part two and talk about the hominid inheritance war. If anybody is new here, I always have notes in front of me, or else I will have squirrel moments and run off track. And if Adrian comes in, he will get me off track. So we'll see if he's going to be here. All right. So let's get going. All right. So the hominid inheritance war. The covenant that they made was not just written. And again, we are talking about the sons of Noah as a label for three specific bloodlines. Now, spoiler alert, those aren't the only three. There were 5. So we'll get into those later. But this covenant of these 3 bloodlines wasn't just written, it was remembered. It was encoded in the blood, the DNA, carried in the body, passed through epigenetic inheritance. Each lineage preserved not just its function, but also its wounds. And these wounds created reenactment loops, cycles of conquest, erasure, resistance, and return over and over again. Okay, so this is Japheth, Ham, and Shem. And everything they've told us about these 3 bloodlines, it's not quite right. So what we call history is often just a trauma loop. Okay, it's trauma repetition. That's why they say history always repeats itself. It's like a trauma loop at a civilization scale. The Japhethic line, which is the Neanderthal line. Okay, so go back and watch part 1 and all the Neanderthal shows I've done to show you with all the receipts that Neanderthals still live today. So the Japhethic line, driven by the Neanderthalic trauma of displacement, cold survival, all the cognitions that they started doing, turned function into dominance. Their generational memory is one of loss of territory, seeking warmth, seeking connection. And so they built walls, they built borders, and systems of control. Empire is not always just ambition, it's inherited fear. Ham's line carries a different trauma. Ham's line is the trauma of being misnamed and mislabeled, demonized and enslaved for carrying the most ancient spiritual technologies. This line remembers rhythm, not rules. It holds the vibration of the earth before Babel. And yet its memory was systematically targeted for erasure. And when we go through that line, I will show you the receipts about who specifically was targeted. And that's through colonial theology, historical inversion, and genetic dispersion. Shem's line, the witness, carries the trauma of betrayal. Tasked with covenantal memory, right, the memory of the covenant, this line became a battlefield for ideological wars. The prophets were often rejected by their own people. Think about prophets. Think about the prophets that you know of, and even people in more modern times who would be called prophets. Anybody that fought for civil rights, prophets, okay? So the prophets were often rejected, even by their own people, and the message was distorted through imperial religion. Shem's trauma is the pain of seeing the truth twisted in his name. To understand this blood war that we have going on with the bloodlines is to recognize that trauma is not just psychological, it's ancestral. It reenacts itself through nations, religions, and institutions. But awareness of the reenactment cycle is the first key to breaking it. All right. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves." That's from Genesis 11:4. The Tower of Babel was not a warning against unity, okay? It's a warning about the wrong kind of unity. And again, I think a lot of what is put in the Bible is man-made, but it's the forced hierarchy of imposed order, engineered by those who confuse domination with divinity. So if I can dominate, it must be divine. Colonization was never just about land or resources. It's about a species-level trauma ritual enacted by the descendants of a wounded hominid line trying to erase what it can't force to integrate. So let's talk about the Neanderthals, which again, if you haven't seen the shows, I've done several about the Neanderthals, but the Neanderthals did not disappear. The interesting thing is, if you look up Neanderthals, it will say they're extinct, but then you put in something like, where is the highest genetic concentration of Neanderthals? And it'll give you an answer. So not extinct, okay? Not extinct, not assimilated, not gone. And the Neanderthals, the way they were back in ancient times, didn't want to assimilate. They would mate with Denisovans. They did not want to mate with Homo sapiens. They did not want to mate with any of the other lines, but they would with the Denisovans. So we do end up with some hybrids, right? That admixture is not 100%, even though, again, we all know people who kind of look like Neanderthals. They survived extinction through interbreeding, yes, but they carried a wound, right? The loss of dominance, because the Neanderthals were the global dominants for a while. They're big, strong, butch-bodied, okay? The memory of displacement, so that's what they've got too, and the rage of erasure, right? When we think about the rage of erasure, think about all the concern about birth rates going down and becoming the not dominant peoples anymore, and trying to create supremacy. Hopefully that makes sense. Yes, Spain man. Hi, Spain man. But look at her, okay? So, all right. So the Neanderthals have this sort of ancestral DNA type urges, right? They lost their dominance. They were displaced by Homo sapiens, and they were kind of erased from history for quite a while. You'll also notice that the more this information comes out about Neanderthals, all of a sudden, we have a lot of videos about how smart the Neanderthals were. Have you guys noticed that? And maybe it's just me because I do a lot of research, that it went from, it's the ooga booga, hit the woman over the head and drag her into the cave. Now it's, well, Neanderthals did math. So be on the lookout for that, because as the information comes out about who the Neanderthals were, which again, receipts, they called themselves the Aryan bloodline and the blue bloods. Now there's different information coming out. But Neanderthals from ancient times to present are warmongers, cannibals, and incestuous. Now, I say that because if we look at data on incest and child sex abuse, there is by far one specific demographic and one gender of that specific demographic. Not to say the other gender doesn't do it or that other people don't do it. But when you look at if 92% of all child sex crimes are done by one specific gender of one specific demographic, it's got to tell you something, okay? So they were warmongers, right? They're cannibals. They used to chew on fingers as a snack. You can find that in archaeological evidence, that they would suck the bone marrow out of fingers and toes. They would boil people. They lived in the cold. There's not a lot to eat, so they would eat each other. But rage was inevitable, okay? Oh, Auntie says, could it be not erased but hidden? Yeah, I think for sure it was hidden. I think for sure. Hi, Adrian. Thanks for being here. So their descendants, so again, this is Japheth's line. This is what they call Japheth's line, okay? Built empires not to expand consciousness or to be closer to God or anything like that, but to prove that they exist and they're important. Look at me, I'm important. Here's my empire. They kind of feel like we were here first and we're not going to be forgotten. And, we will make you us or we'll destroy you. So colonialism is not just about greed, right? It's revenge against the Denisovan and the Sapien codes that kind of outlasted them and outdid them, not through force, but through rhythm, memory, communion, growth, right? So let's talk about their trauma ritual, because I think you'll see it. You'll see it even in present times. So wherever the Neanderthal dominant descendants colonized, the pattern repeated, right? And so another thing that I showed, you guys can go back and get those receipts, is that the Goths were the Neanderthals, okay? And even archaeological evidence shows that the Goths were Neanderthals, okay? Everywhere that they colonized, this pattern repeated itself. So number one, what always starts, erase the earth wisdom, okay? Which is the Denisovan line, okay? So sacred groves are burned, indigenous languages are silenced, matrilineal lines are fractured. And we've talked about that before, how patrilineal inheritance is earthly inheritance, which is good. We all need that to survive. And, that's where advice comes from and survival skills, hunting, critical thinking, building, all of that comes from patrilineal. Matrilineal is spiritual inheritance, spiritual connection to the earth, those kind of things. But earth wisdom comes from the Denisovan line. So if you've kind of figured out a little bit of who the Denisovans are, you'll see it. Erase the earth wisdom, burn the sacred groves, silence the language, fracture the matrilineal lines, plant knowledge turned into pharmaceuticals, which is indicative of anything that you're doing for free, we're going to figure out how to monetize. And land that was revered was turned into property. Okay. So number two is disruption of the prophets or any prophetic line, which again is the Shemite line. Okay. Prophets are killed or canonized, sanitized, right? Where that's kind of like the Catholics will be like, oh, your god or goddess is actually this other, and we're going to turn that person into a saint. You see? So canonized and sanitized, or just killed off. Texts are redacted and weaponized, any of these ancient texts. Moral systems are replaced with legal codes. Covenant is replaced with contracts, and oral traditions are turned into state-sanctioned doctrine. And we talked last time about state-sanctioned religious practices and state-sanctioned doctrine. Adrian says, don't forget weaponization of sickness, even back then. Yes, absolutely. And remember, those religious dogma always tells you that you are the problem. You are sick. You are a sinner. You are evil. Your body hates you. Your soul hates you. Like all of this to hate yourself. Cosmic Server says they turned Eden into a prison for profit. Absolutely. And then number 3 is their obsession with blood and breeding. And that may sound a little wild, but listen, this is where you get things like eugenics movements, the blue blood aristocracy, forced sterilizations, purity laws, genetic mapping, and genetic surveillance. That all comes from this obsession with blood and breeding. These are not just crimes, they're scripts, right? It's a repeating performance over and over again of their embedded ancestor memory in the colonizer's DNA, right? It's in their DNA to do this. Doesn't mean that they can't change, just saying we see it over and over and over. Do you guys see it? Hopefully you do. You probably wouldn't be watching me if you didn't. Okay. So the colonizer doesn't just kill the other. Okay. Even though we see a lot of killings and genocide in the Christian Bible and we see some war, some fighting, some in ancient texts. They make it seem like everybody was at war and killing each other all the time. That's literally not how it was. So the colonizer doesn't just kill the other, he tries to become the other in some way, shape, or form, right? When the Neanderthal descended powers encountered the Denisovian sapiens, okay, they did 2 things. So whether they were purely Denisovan, purely sapien, or the Denisovan-sapien mix, number 1, extermination when resistance rose. This is why I have on here, resistance is futile. Okay. So think Haiti, Congo, Tasmania, Palestine, right? Extermination when resistance arose. Or number 2, extraction and mimicry, especially when resistance is spiritual. Okay. So think about Egyptian symbols are co-opted in Freemasonry, African rhythms stolen for Western music, the Hebrew covenant rebranded into Imperial Zionism, plant medicines turned into controlled pharmaceuticals, indigenous wisdom licensed, patented, and sold back to its own people. Even other things where you now have to have an agent, right? So if you are an actor, an actress, a singer, a talent, a sports player, it's the agent, right, who gets the money. And in sports, it's even worse because you have an owner, right? So this extraction and mimicry happens all the time. People take other people's dances, other people's songs, other people's style, other people's rhythm, and pretend like that they invented it, okay? The mimicry, pretending, is not memory. And without spiritual integration, the colonizer remains fractured, haunted by the very soul that it seeks to consume, because it's kind of lost theirs. Not all, again, but some. Hi, Chef Mike. Thank you for being here. Adrian says, limpieza de sangre, translated as cleanliness of blood, which was a justification of caste systems in the New World. Yeah, and the caste systems always had to do with blood. Aristocracy always had to do with blood, right? This is what I tell people all the time. You've probably heard me say this. If they tell you who they are, believe them. If I repeat what other elite people have said, and I say they said this, it's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's me reporting on a conspiracy. It's me reporting on a thing. So their obsession with blood and bloodlines and DNA is well documented. This is them. I'm not making this up. This is how they are. Hi, Eddie. Thank you for being here. Okay, so let's talk about the core code of empire, which is spiritual inversion. Okay, empires don't just pop up out of nowhere, right? They don't just occur, right? It's almost like a reassigning of function when an empire happens, okay? They take what was sacred and then reroute it towards control, okay? The rise of an empire is not just like a geopolitical shift that just sort of happened, okay? It's a spiritual inversion of that original bloodline covenant between Noah's sons. Now, again, this is what they label them, okay? Whether they were actual people at the beginning of these bloodlines who made an actual covenant, I don't know. I wasn't there. But these are the labels that they use, okay? So Japheth's line was meant to structure, not dominate, right? This is the Neanderthal line. Structure, not dominate. Ham's line was meant to remember, but keeps getting erased. Shem's line was meant to be the witness, right? But Shem's line is constantly ruled over. As conquest expanded, all these roles became distorted. Spiritual knowledge was extracted from Ham's descendants and rebranded through Greco-Roman mysteries, right? Everything we find in Greco-Roman mysteries, we can find before that in Africa. Now, I want to stop for a second because sometimes you will hear people say, oh, they stole that from here, right? This story is super old. This story is from Sumer. This is from Mesopotamia. This is from ancient Persia. This is from, ancient Africa. This is from, Northern Africa. This is, and they will say they stole that. Something I want to say about Greece, okay? This is supposedly the birthplace of philosophy, right? This is what we learn. But in Greece, to become a teacher, a counsel, to even draw crowds for these big debates, that they did, to be able to write philosophy, it's just much like today, you have to go to school. And where they went to school was in Kemet. So I think it's up for debate on whether these Greek philosophers stole it, because those philosophers, especially Plato and Pythagoras, they were big supporters of Kemet, and they bragged about studying in Kemet. They were open about being in Kemet, and then where they got a lot of their ideas from, and they took them to the next level. So I don't think necessarily they were attempting to steal and rebrand, because they were constantly talking about how they, went to school in Kemet. And Pythagoras himself went to school in Kemet for 12 years. And he was very, very proud of that. So, but we can see a lot of what comes out of Greece already was occurring in Kemet, because that's where they learned it. Okay. So, we're talking about Shem. Shem's line meant to witness, not rule. Okay. But as conquest expanded, the roles became distorted. Spiritual knowledge was extracted from Ham's descendants, right? That's where we get the Greco-Roman mysteries, right? And then Shem's oral traditions were weaponized by imperial religion. Japhethic systems, once rooted in necessity, right? You need structure and buildings, became a totalizing structure of hierarchy, law, and commerce. That's the Japhethic line. I think the theft came in when the credit for the education was obscured. Right. And what I'm saying is, I think, and you're right, you're totally right. I'm not sure they did it, but then in the retelling of ancient Greece, his story, they changed it up and said, Greece is the birthplace of philosophy, and neglected to tell people that these great philosophers studied in Kemet. Okay, and this was the dynastic time of Kemet, meaning these are the time of the great African pharaohs. And that's always going to be hidden because the pharaohs that we had during the dynastic time were of not just Ham's line, but also Shem's line, because Shem's line isn't just Arabic. Shem's line also comes from Central Africa, but we'll get into those. Okay. Hi, Cynical. Thanks for being here. Okay. So empire operates by stealing birthright and selling it back as dogma. Okay. Like everything that you have as a right of being a human person on this planet from being born, all the credit, again, spiritual inversion, all the credit for that is taken away from you and given to this external entity and this external program, religion, especially Abrahamics. And then you have to buy it back. You have to pay your tithing. You have to pay, you used to have to pay to do your sacrifices. You have to work for the church. You have to help the church do the fundraisers. You have to, and then it's your job to go out and get more members, right? So it's sold back to us as dogma when it's our birthright. But if anything goes wrong, that's my fault. But if anything goes right, that's somebody else's, glory. That doesn't seem quite fair or logical, really. The colonizers never invented civilization. We had civilization well before colonizers. They found it. I think sometimes this is why a lot of systems, churches, court buildings, all that never say built, they always say founded because they found them. They renamed them and then claimed divine right. I read a statistic today, or the other day, I'm sorry, that when the Spanish landed in North America, there were estimated to be 104 million people on the continent. That's a lot, right? No, I'm sorry, 10.4, not 104. I'm sorry, 10.4 million people on the continent. That's a lot of people. And within a few years, it was down to like 2 million-ish, I think. I think that was the number. I was just shocked at the 10.4 million people. And there are letters that you can find. They're very hard to find. You can't do it through regular VPNs. But there are letters that you can find talking about marketplaces that were set up, right? And the type of people that were here, and the caliphans, and, that 11 of the 12 tribes of Israel were on the continent. You will find letters back and forth that will tell you these things, but all of that is hidden from us, okay? But the spiritual inversion is why so many ancient traditions have similar archetypes. Ancient traditions were global. They might have had a different name for different things, but they were doing the same stuff and believing a lot of the same stuff, even to the point of doing carvings of the same things, doing cave drawings of the same things, right? They had similar archetypes, cosmologies, and rituals, right? Because humans were sort of connected in that way. Then empire fractured them and labeled them myth, right? Okay. From Babylon to Rome, Khazars to Catholicism, the institutions of empire were shaped by the same playbook. Okay. Erase Ham, domesticate Shem, and enthrone Japheth as the image of order. We see it over and over and over. Even the biblical canon was curated by the Romans, right? To support this structure. So only the books were let in that support that structure. The way we're taught to teach others is that structure. So choosing which texts would define spiritual law was what the Romans did. And then they decided which would be buried and which would be burned. And you can find information about that still. But the function of people cannot be fully destroyed. It lingers in our language choices, our rhythm, our institutions, our dreams, even. The rise of empire may have disrupted the covenant and what it was meant for, but it didn't end it. Hopefully, I'm making sense so far. And you guys see what I'm talking about. So, all empires, no matter the era, the name, the flag they were under, whatever, are built on this fourfold structure right here. And it is designed to suppress the bloodlines of Ham and Shem and to elevate the fractured dominance of the Japhethic line, which is the Goths, which is the Neanderthals. Okay. Number one, ownership of land, totally against Ham. Okay. This is enclosures, fences, maps, titles, walls. This is sacred land converted into economic resources. So this is no longer us living, co-partnering with the land. It's ownership. Then indigenous land-based identities are erased and criminalized. Land becomes a commodity, not part of your kinship, right? You have this kinship with the earth. We don't have it anymore because you don't own it. And even if you own your house, you still don't own the land. You have it on a deed, but the government can come and take it anytime they want. They can take your land, they can take your house, they can take your vehicles, they can take your kids, they can take anything that they want to by law, okay? Then we have number two, ownership of people. That is against Shem, okay? From slavery to serfdom to wage slavery, right? Human beings have been reduced to a labor unit, right? They're a labor unit, or they are a voting citizen, or they are a consumer, or they are a data point. This is all human beings have become because they're owned. And prophets and people having prophetic wisdom is replaced by policies and laws. They will tell you who you are and you will follow the rules. Adrian says, put a 1 in the chat if we are all still following Mags and listening intently. Thank you, because sometimes I'm like, where'd everybody go? All right, so the third one is ownership of the narrative, and that is against both Ham and Shem's line. Okay, so we have mythic inversion. The colonizer somehow becomes the chosen people. Don't we see this today still? And you can look back through history and all the times this is happened, but we see it happening now, where the colonizer is the chosen person. And if they can't be the chosen person, they'll be the victim, and they'll be a perpetual victim. They will be sitting there harming people and say, I am oppressed, right? We see it. We see it. All right. Cosmic Surfer still listening and Adrian's still listening. Thank you, everybody. All right. Then histories of spiritual peoples are rewritten as myths. It's just a myth. It didn't happen, right? It's a myth. It's a legend, right? And if they can't convince you it's a myth or it's legend, then they call it savage, barbaric, right? Uncivilized. We're bringing civilization to the savages, right? Media becomes mass ritual magic. That's all I ever see media as, right? It's mass ritual magic. Or if you want to go from a psychological standpoint, they are creating groupthink. And groupthink is where if I say it enough, then I'll tell you what to think. And if I get enough people thinking the same thing, they reinforce each other. Okay. It shapes perception, and it literally can change people's memories. Isn't that interesting? Adric's here. Yay. He didn't want to be left out. Cosmic servers as labels. Yeah. JB Design says, I think for the most part, things are leveling out. Notice the amount of interbreeding going on and people traveling where they want to, creating new groups that imperialists can't control. The interesting thing, JB, is you might find that when we talk about crossing racial divides or even cultural divides, to date, to mate, to marry, to have children, those kind of things. You may be interested to find that people are still staying within their bloodlines, but bloodlines have been so perverted and distorted that we think the bloodlines are based on race, and they're not. Now, the only exception to that is to kind of think about the Neanderthal line. The interesting thing about the Neanderthal line is all Neanderthals are white construct, right? They call themselves blue bloods, okay? And they have to be pale enough to see the veins, so they're white, right? So all Neanderthals are white, but not all white people are Neanderthals. So when we get into that bloodline, how that works, I'm going to bring a lot of receipts, a lot. Okay. But again, I think people may be surprised that you're not really dating out. You've just been told you're not supposed to do that because they can control the bloodlines if they create this label called race, and they have made race a thing, right? Imperialist people, colonizing people, supremacist people created race, and then they made it a thing, a real thing that now has to be attended to in a way to disguise these bloodlines. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully. But yes, you are right. People are dating across racial and cultural sort of barriers, I guess. It's not really barriers, but and then so the last one is the ownership of time, which is like a total control. Okay? Calendars, clocks, tax years, fiscal quarters, everything is about time. That's how they keep control. They replaced the sacred cyclical time with this linear extractive time. I read a quote. It's by Charles Schultz, and I'm probably not going to get the quote exactly right, but it was something like, the price for anything is how much of your life you're willing to pay for it. And it's interesting to think about it that way, because the money that you have, you exchanged your life, part of your life for your time, your energy, your skills and talents that you could be out there living your life. We have to sell it because everything is commoditized, and we have to live. Okay, hopefully you guys can hear me. Every time I hit the microphone, it turns off. So then I have to turn it back on. And I get to talking with my hands and I hit the microphone and all that kind of thing. So Hopefully you guys can hear me. If not, somebody will tell me. But that ownership of time, okay? We have replacing the cyclical time with this extractive time. What time do I have to be at work? How many hours do I have to be at work? How much of my life do I have to sell to then get money to purchase something? Okay. This disconnects humanity from the seasonal, the ancestral, and the celestial rhythm, right? The blueprint is not arbitrary. This happens every time they go to build an empire. It's a psychological exorcism ritual, right? It's a script encoded into the architecture, the law, the language by this Japhethic, Gothic, Neanderthal bloodline, somehow trying to annihilate its own vulnerability. We're still here. We're never going to be replaced. We're always going to be around. We're always going to be on top. And no matter what, no matter what. Adric says, yeah, how long till retirement? I know people who have like countdowns on their phones to retirement, right? They have you, and it's time. Time is what is controlling you. And if you watched my show on Yahweh, you will see it, because we talk about time. The god Sin is time, or you could call him Chronos. Similar god. Okay. So the blueprint, how it functions, how the blueprint functions, which again, I talked about at the first one, the bloodlines. Okay. So we have the military. So that's enforcement. That is built from the Neanderthal instincts of territorial aggression. And we see this through ancient artifacts, archaeological digs. The Neanderthals have always been territorially aggressive. They would create a territory and create boundaries and land that belonged to them. This is from ancient times. So again, they will tell you who they are. So when you see it keep happening over and over again with the same people who have the highest admixture of Neanderthal blood, and they're still doing it today, this is why I say what I say. That ensures compliance and silences resistance, right? So what is the giant military industrial complex? It's the United States, right? Then we have finance, that's extraction. This is invented by merchant elites of Japheth's house, especially through the Khazar Ashkenazi hybrid, right? To replace land and spirit with debt and credit. That is part of that Japheth line. Okay. This is another one where not all Jews are in Japheth's line, but there are people who call themselves Jews who are in Japheth's line. Okay. Then, Spainman says, scary to wonder if they'll go away peacefully and quietly. I mean, we haven't seen that yet in the history of all the hominids we've had on the planet. Religion is control, because if you control the spirit or you break the spirit, you control the person, right? So sacred texts are edited and reinterpreted to justify empire, right? Temples were turned into tax centers, right? These are tax collections or centers of like psychological conditioning. You go to this building to be told what you think, who you are, and how to behave. All right, then we have technology, which is the surveillance, right? Surveillance of thought. Modern evolution of the Tower of Babel. Now, I don't personally think the Tower of Babel was an inherently bad thing. But again, kind of have my own thoughts on the invention of Yahweh, okay? Today's towers are data centers, right? Satellites, surveillance drones. It's not really reaching the heavens, but it's watching everything under the heavens, right? Spainman says, and now they have nuclear technology. Of course, because they also steal technology. And Adrian says they're literally willing to destroy the entire planet if they alone cannot have it, if they alone cannot rule it. And I totally agree. Okay. All right. So let's talk about spiritual engineering, right? This is the colonizer's redemption script. Okay. The Japheth world order is not simply about greed. And by the way, these are all the people, which you've heard me say before, talk about the New World Order. These people, okay? Nowadays, they're calling it technocracy, but these are the same people and the same thing. It's about self-justification. I'm here, right? We have to bring civilization to the savages, right? I have to justify what I'm doing. I have to justify my existence. I have to bring civilization to the savages. I have to bring Jesus around the world and evangelize. I have to protect the world from chaos. I have to get involved with everything that's going on. We are the chosen people. We are advanced. We are progress. I have to bring progress. It's that justification of their very existence. That's a trauma response, by the way. Seeing it from a psychological point of view, that's a trauma response. It's a trauma response that looks eerily similar to narcissistic personality disorder. I say this to people several times when I talk about our relationship in the United States, and it's probably everywhere in the Western world. Our relationship to our government is like having a parent with narcissistic personality disorder. And some of the children are their favorite children. Some of the children are sort of get treated like middle children. They're just the middle children, They're always causing a problem, but, love them anyway. And some of the stepchildren and some are the foster kids that they're just getting paid to take care of. But we all have a narcissistic relationship with our government because our government operates like something that has narcissistic personality disorder. We see it. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. We know it's there. Don't you feel like sometimes this is like a narcissistic parent, like it's an abusive relationship with our government? We get the illusion of choice. We're told what to do. They act like our parents. They act like we're all dumb and we don't know what we're doing or how to behave. And they have their favorites and they have the kids they hate. Like we see it, right? Our financial systems are that way too. It's like, well, you can have a little bit of an allowance, but if you can't save your allowance, well, then you're doing it wrong and you're a bad child. But our religion is that way too. It acts like a parent in telling us we're too stupid to make our own decisions and to come up with our own answers, to the point where it's a sin and you can go to hell for asking a question. That's some control right there. That is control. JB Design says, would you say the decentralization of finance via crypto and other sources would go far to give people more agency over their own lives since they wouldn't answer to bankers? I think that the financiers and the elite are always going to have their fingers in anything they're allowing to happen. They would have killed crypto if they couldn't make money off of crypto. So to me, I don't think it's as freeing. But it could be better than banking. But I'm also thinking about at any point in time, crypto can be shut down because it's all data-driven electronic, right? It's nothing in your hand. But that's how bankers get away with doing what they're doing and extracting so much, because they can alter anything that's in the data and then tell you what you have to do. You know, they can just decide that your loans come due or your payments late, or they can take your house, whatever. Spain Man says, so it's really the Neanderthals' burden then. Yeah. And too many of our siblings have bought into the hype, right? Like, you can see some people who really enjoy being daddy's favorite, and they don't want to trade. They don't want all the kids to be equal, because that means they can't be daddy's favorite anymore. So they'll fight tooth and nail to remain daddy's favorite. Even though they may love or hate their siblings, doesn't matter, but they'll fight tooth and nail to stay daddy's favorite. Adrian says the original intent was exactly that, but under Obama and Trump, they started to get control over it. Now, crypto is a tool of the technate. Well, that's kind of what I was thinking. So I'm glad to hear somebody has the actual right words. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for that. Or they just think the family dynamic is an optimal formation. Yeah. They might think, well, of course I'm daddy's favorite. Of course I am. Why wouldn't I not be? Right? So this is the modern evolution of the Tower of Babel. Okay. So anyway, we have spiritual engineering. Okay. They're justifying their own existence. It's a trauma response, but it's eerily similar to a narcissistic personality disorder of a system. Okay. And it goes through the government, the financial systems, and the religion. And they all kind of operate the same. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. They operate kind of the same. To the Neanderthal bloodline, control is survival. So they feel like if they don't have control, they don't survive. Then we'll be replaced. Then we'll die out. Then we'll, it's very catastrophizing. Okay. Because in their ancestral memory, they were outbred, displaced, erased, beat at their own game, couldn't compete. So control, they don't ever have to compete if they can control everything. Okay. Their empire is kind of like their ark in the flood. Their control. This is the way they survive. It's their tower. It's their fortress against extinction. And yet, as we've all seen, every empire falls. Every single one has fallen, because what they build on domination can't hold on to that. Life always wins. Life always tries to find a way. So empires always fall, because dominion cannot last forever. Okay? That empire is a copy of this lost original covenant that they're trying to get back to. The blueprint of empire mimics everything, but it doesn't contain any type of sacred order. Its temples copy Hamite pyramids, but it inverts the energy, right? We even see it on our dollar bill, the pyramids, right? We're using it to worship Mammon, to worship Baal. We're worshiping money, those kind of things that inverts the entire energy of what goes into the pyramids. The empire's laws distort Shemite prophecy and then make it punishment and profit. Like the whole game, the whole existence is punishment and profit for everything. Its medicine steals from plant spirit wisdom, but it erases the spirit part of it, right? And they'll give you chemicals and pharmaceuticals that then you have side effects from, because you're taking a bunch of chemicals, and they'll give you more chemicals to combat the side effects of the chemicals, because they will never legalize things that are free or easy to get, right? If they can't make a buck off of it, you can't have it. Okay. Empire is the counterfeit Eden, that we were talking about. It's the counterfeit Eden. It's a mechanical mimicry of the divine womb that it can never return to. It's built not to heal, but to almost like outrun or outlast the memory of that pain, of never being able to compete, being outbred, outlasted, right? Bettered, bested, you know? Adrian says, think about the lengths that the Spanish Empire went to preserve a perfect lineage, physical disfigurement, etc., and an effort to maintain dominion. I mean, and to add to that, think about all these empires, these blue-blooded people, which the Spanish were part of that, who were incestuous, right? To keep the bloodline pure and to keep the wealth in house, you know. Adric says, like weed. Absolutely, weed is a medicine. I'm a psychologist, obviously. I would say weed is a medicine. It's been proven. Spainman says it's, yeah, all these synthetic versions of actual plants, right? So you get the dirty version of it because it's a chemical, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's they're creating this empire to try to have an Eden unto themselves, but it's a counterfeit Eden. All right? So the next phase of empire is the digital Babel. Okay? The final tower, the thing that's going to make it as permanent as possible for them is not made out of stone. It is not Auntie, be good. I'm sure it's 420 somewhere, maybe at Auntie's house. So this digital Babel, it is AI, it is surveillance, it is biogenetic engineering, it is transhumanism, it is technocracy. This is what they are moving into to kind of put the final push in this domination and control and to sort of come out on top, to win, right? What's like their goal is to control the blood, to rewrite the memory, to own the spirit, either by deleting it or digitizing it, right? It's not just good enough for them to have an empire. It's sort of like this mechanized flood, the final purge of what the Neanderthal code hasn't been able to conquer yet. So the blueprint, though, can be disrupted, okay? Especially because the people who still carry that earth-based wisdom, you know, even if they didn't necessarily learn it, but they feel something, they feel it, they dream about it, they just have a natural ability to like know what the weather is going to be like, or they're really good with plants, or they're kind of into, you know, all natural hair products, skincare, vitamins, food. You know, these kind of people still carry that earth-based resonance of that ham line, right? They still got that, right? Or the covenant vibrations of Shem, people who are a bit prophetic, spiritual, knowledgeable, able to connect, you know, able to see things from 35,000 feet, you know. Shem's line still has that, right? And even the people in Japheth's line who have consciously recognized the issue with Japheth's line, because Japheth's line was never intended to be this way. Japheth's line was supposed to be about structure and building. It's the architects, but they turned it into dominion. But all of those people, the Ham's line, Shem's line, Japheth's line, and the other two lines, if they can maintain who they are, if they can remember who they are, if they can own who they are, then it can be disrupted. Trauma will travel through blood until it is named. And as much as this trauma and this need to justify existence is hidden and put behind the back and never talked about, and history has changed, we haven't been able to name it. We haven't been able to bring it to the light and name it. The Japhethic bloodline cannot be cured by dominating them. well, if we were in charge, we would, and they need punished and blah, blah. That's not what's going to take care of the problem, is to be better colonizers than they are. That's not what's going to work, right? We have to confront this species trauma, this hominid trauma. We can't suppress Ham and Shem's line anymore. It all has to be reconciled, which can only start with the Neanderthal line's accountability and responsibility. If we want to reconcile, it has to start with that line, that sort of supremacist colonizer mentality has to be accountable, right? Likewise, the descendants of Ham and Shem cannot reclaim their legacy by just mimicking empire, by playing along with the game, by trying to win a game that you were set up to lose, right? It's never going to happen. It's part of the dominion and the control. Or by taking over and doing to them what they did to me, it's all about just stop playing the game. It was rigged. It'll continue to make you lose, and you'll always lose. And the only people who win are the people that they allow to win. And as we've all seen, even if they let you win, they will make you lose. Eventually, they will make you lose because you're not one of them, and you never will be. Their power, right? Our power, Ham's line, Shem's line, and the healed Japhethic line lies in remembrance, in rhythm, in ritual, in restoration. We're now kind of in this final act, this final push of this digital flood that's happening. There's some sort of thing that's happening. We can all feel it, The waters are digital, they're genetic, they're psychological. This is the psyops, right? The war is no longer about ships and sword fights, right? It's about DNA, ownership, surveillance, and neural capture at this point. So we got to break the pattern, right? JB Design says, I think the internet could, in theory, be a Tower of Babel-like construct, since it allows people from all over the world to collaborate and share knowledge to subvert the imperialists. I don't disagree. I think at some point we're going to have to go beyond. The internet is sort of like an external collective unconscious. And I think at some point we have to go beyond the internet into the collective unconscious, because we may not always have access to the internet. Okay. So we got to break the pattern, right? Quit playing a game that you're going to lose. But you can write the story. I tell you guys all the time, you are the main character of your story. Nobody's going to come save you. Nobody's going to change your life. Nobody's going to, it's you, right? So the next chapter in your story is yours to write. But it would kind of be nice if you remember who you are, and more importantly, who you are not. Okay. Now, on that note, future episodes will go into specifically these bloodlines, the 5 bloodlines. Okay. Now, 3 are labeled through Noah's sons, that story of Noah, right? Which is, Japheth, Ham, and Shem. And so we'll talk about those 3 bloodlines. And then there's 2 other bloodlines. And so we'll talk about those. And maybe if people are interested, that will help you to figure out which bloodline you might be in, and to see how much it fits and what we can do when we remember who we are, and our hominid lineage might be kind of nice. So coming up tomorrow night, we will continue with the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch. So we'll do a breakdown of the next key. Can't remember if it's 203 or 204, one of those, but we'll do a breakdown of the key. I've been traveling a lot, sorry. And then the next show will be on Sunday, the 15th, for Father's Day. And it's going to be a show about wizards of the old world. And if people really like that one, I might do one on the Magi of the old world, because they're essentially the same thing, just different places. But that show is in response to another creator who I need to kind of correct, but mostly just give information to. So that'll be on Father's Day. I thought that would be a fun Father's Day show to talk about wizards of the old world. So hopefully you guys can be here this coming Wednesday. If not, hopefully I see you on Sunday for Father's Day. And if you are a father, I'll tell you ahead of time, Happy Father's Day. So I'm going to, first of all, say, I love you, I miss you, and you're my favorite. And then I'm going to show you a picture of my dog.
Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to check out some of the wilder Pivot Point Wednesday shows. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not so teric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. By subscribing, you'll join a community that thrives on curiosity and growth, and you'll never miss out on insights and some wild discussions. Let's uncover the universe together. Bye.